Okay, we can start the stream right now. Welcome everybody to our special talk on living in the endemic era. And this special talk is organized by the Assembly of God of Malaysia. We know that our country is beginning to open up, and in fact, currently many people are outstationed traveling interstate because state borders have been opened. But I believe that the impact will be great in the very near future. And I find that this topic is really very relevant to us and very important to us, especially for us who are churches, Christians, looking forward to open up the churches. I believe that this is also very timely to prepare us. All right. Before we go further, to introduce a speaker or to continue with our talk, let's just begin with a word of prayer, shall we? Father, we just want to thank you that this afternoon we can gather in this manner. Thank you for protecting each and every one of us. The Lord, that we are strong, we are healthy, that we are able to join this talk. Thank you for healing some of those who may have been infected before, but they have recovered and they are also joining us today. We just pray, Lord, that you will grant us the understanding, even as Dr. Amar shared with us, Lord, his knowledge and his expertise regarding this issue. We pray for your wisdom to be upon him and help him, Lord, to be able to communicate it so clearly that all of us will have a better understanding to prepare ourselves to live in the coming endemic season. So be with us, Lord. Give us a sense of your assurance, your presence, and the hope that we can have in you, no matter what we are going through in life, that Jesus, you are our solid rock and you are our strength. So we just want to commit this session to you, and we pray that we will have uninterrupted Zoom session, that everyone will be able to log in smoothly and we will have a pleasant time together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And since this session is organized by the Assembly of God of Malaysia, we just want to acknowledge the presence of our Bishop, Reverend Ong Sik Liang, who is here joining this Zoom session as well. We are really thankful to God for his leadership and helping to spear this movement ahead. Okay, and well, I think you can stop share so that I can take over to share my Zoom before I introduce the speaker. Okay, I introduce the speaker first. All right, as you know that we are having this talk on the living in the endemic era, and we have invited a very seasoned person that is very much involved in helping us through. And he's no stranger, Datuk Dr. Amar Singh. We know that he has been very active in the government sector as a senior consultant community pediatrician for over 35 years in the Malaysian Civil Service. And we also know that he is an active child advocate, and he has a long-standing involvement with the disabled, marginalized, and disadvantaged children as well. And he has also held office at the National Early Childhood Intervention Council as the president. And in recognition of his exemplary work in research and pediatrics, he received the Tun Abdul Razak Research Reward in 1994, Outstanding Asian Pediatrician Award 2012, and Senaya Advocacy Reward 2016. And this pandemic have kept him very, very busy. Last year, we have a session with him regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. And during this time, he is having many talk, many presentations back to back, not only dealing with pandemic, endemic, but also dealing with cyber safety.
Pastor Yingming, you are muted. Unmute yourself, Pastor Yingming.
Okay. Just muted only, is it? Okay. So during this session, we are going to have two different sections. The first section, we are going to deal with how this endemic is going to impact our life. as we live our life, as we go outside, our daily living. Then the second part of this session is more focused on how it impacts the churches with regard to Christian worship, with regard to church opening. Okay, and Dr. Amma is going to answer the question. I'm going to flash the question to you in order for us to save time and also to give him more liberty. We are going to just, sorry, let me just enlarge my slideshow first. All right, I'm sure you can see now. Okay, so what we are going to do is I'm going to ask him a series of questions first because they are all related. They are all related, and he's going to answer them all. And then later on, we will pause and we will go to the second set of session for our second part. All right. So now we are going to start. And this first session, we are going to deal with how this endemic is going to impact on our daily lives. And these are the questions that Amma is going to help us through. Question number one is, do you think at this juncture, our country is ready to move into the endemic phase? What are the criteria or measurement to transit from pandemic to endemic? What are the implications? Number two, how would this affect our daily lives as we learn to live with COVID-19? Will there be another spike that might bring us back to the pandemic, especially now with the state border open? We are able to dine in and people sometimes just lose the gut. I'm just afraid that, we may backpedal. All right. Question number three, what are some of the new realities we have to deal with, and will there be an end to the endemic? Number four, how will life in general be different for those who are vaccinated and those who are not? And yesterday, we all heard the news that the health minister is rather strong. He makes some strong statement with regard to those who are not vaccinated yet. So what is your advice to those who are still unvaccinated? And lastly, number five, countries with herd immunity are experiencing a spike with the fully vaccinated, especially Israel and Singapore. These two countries, were, you can say they were the early adopters, right? Very fast, they got the population vaccinated and high proportion. So does it mean there's a drop in protection after 6 months of vaccination? And what is your opinion of a third dose or booster dose? Is there a different third dose and booster dose? What about mixing of vaccine for this booster? So over to you, Amma.
Thank you very much, Pastor Wong Ying Meng, and thank you to the Assemblies of God for this kind invitation today. I enjoy working with Ying Meng because she's very thorough and her organization is excellent. And I enjoy that very much. I come to you again, as always, asking that we receive the discernment of the Holy Spirit, which we need desperately, all of us. Secondly, that we rely on the hope that Jesus brought to us at the cross. It's a fundamental place that I go to always to look for my hope. And thirdly, that we seek the eternal grace of our Father. Allow me to share a screen and take you through some of these thoughts. What I'm going to share here is probably also relevant to other religious groups, not just to Christians, but I'm going to focus a lot on what it means to be living in the endemic era and how to understand boosters and how to reopen safely. I want to say at the very beginning, as always, that the pandemic is an evolution. We don't know what's coming. I think COVID-19 has surprised many of us a couple of times. So we need to always keep abreast with the evidence and science, and we need increasing discernment. I rely a lot on reading a lot of the good work done by many people in the world, listening to other people as well. And also I belong to a couple of good groups, doctors where we think, and my wife is always a wonderful support for this. Okay, there's a link to files, and I would like the tech group to share this link right now. I wrote specially this one here, Reopening Churches Safely, that you may be interested. I extensively rewrote the ventilation document, which you will need. I will say a lot of things about ventilation as we go forward. This is the missing element in Malaysia. So please consider these two files. But you may want this one. I wrote for getting children back to school safely because it may apply to Sunday schools. You may want to read this one about safe workplaces and homes, a child vaccination fact sheet in case you're thinking about vaccinating your children. And finally, an old guidance that we wrote last year, a couple of us, including my wife, which is still very relevant because it's a very detailed guidance about keeping the church safe, but definitely 1 and 2, okay? All right, I'm moving on. So I'm going to cover these areas that Yin Beng talked about. Let's just jump straight in. Okay, let's talk first about COVID realities, and let's talk about Delta impact and the breakthrough after vaccination to answer some of the questions that she asked us. Okay, now we know Delta is highly contagious. We moved from the original Wuhan strain to the Delta strain, and we know that Delta strain spreads very, very rapidly. I don't think it's 5, I think it's more like 8. 1% will affect 8 people very quickly. And so this is one of the problems that has caused a problem to us because Delta is so highly infectious. Okay. Is it more severe? If you look at this good study from UK, they showed twice as many admissions. Again, I'm talking unvaccinated people here, twice as many admissions. Another recent study from Canada showed that it's 2 to 3 times more severe, 2 to 3 times more hospitalization, ICU admissions, or death. So Delta definitely is more nasty than the original strain and causing more illness in the unvaccinated. This unpublished data from Florida showed that even for children and young adults, is now 3 times more severe than it was before, 3 times more number of deaths. And we are seeing this in Malaysia as well. We've got a lot more young people and children who are now affected, who were okay last year, but Delta has now, damaged young individuals. I'm giving a profile of what's happened to us since the Delta wave came. Delta hit us around July. This is looking at July, August, September data, 3 months. And you can see that more than 3/4 of all our deaths occurred in these 3 months purely because of Delta. And 1 in 5 persons was brought in dead, mainly because we got overrun, our health services got overrun, the numbers were so huge. Notice that now males and females are about the same. Previously, it was more men. Women have lost the kind of benefit that they have with Delta coming. Again, a lot more young individuals now, well people, 1 in 2 are now younger, under 60, and 1 in 3 are now people with no diseases, no chronic illnesses at all. So Delta seems to come down in age, affect women more. You can die at home without knowing. And of course, we have no clue of the number of people who die after leaving hospital. We estimate it's probably 2%. 20% of all those who leave the ICU will still die from damage that occurs in their lives. So this number of deaths that we saw in this period actually is much higher than the actual number. So Delta is a lot more severe. Okay, 2 to 3 times more hospitalization. Again, this is without vaccination. Once you're vaccinated, you reduce your death risk by 10 times. Singapore data says 14 times. I'll talk a bit more about this as we go on. Okay. So the question that is in all our minds, do we need a booster? I'm going to come to vaccinated, unvaccinated at the end because I like to summarize with that. But do we need a booster? Are vaccines working with us? Now, before Delta, we knew that the vaccines work at this point. They prevented infection. But with Delta, we know that breakthrough, that infections can occur. And we're now looking more at here. Can the vaccines prevent a severe infection? We don't mind getting infected, but we don't want to be hospitalized, die, or get a severe infection. And so we need to ask this question about Delta. Is it Delta is now getting past our vaccination, the vaccines don't work so well? Or is it that the immunity drops after a while? The real answer is a bit of both that's happening to us. Now, it's very hard to understand this without looking at real world data because we're not looking at antibodies alone. We're looking at something called your cellular immunity. So it's not just your antibody levels, but your cell's ability to respond because you have a memory in your cells after vaccination, and that protects you as well. Okay. So looking at what the data is showing, and here I'm looking at about breakthrough, I'm looking at AstraZeneca and Pfizer. This is from the UK, very good UK data. They've shown that when they had the Alpha strain moving to Delta strain, the vaccine doesn't protect as well. AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines don't protect as well against a breakthrough infection. About 30% of people now get infected compared to previously, but hospitalization still very good. Okay, this is the latest study that has come up from the Lancet, looking at hospital staff. They're looking at millions of individuals here. They're tracking them. Look at the purple line here. This looks at how much breakthrough in people, what percentage of breakthrough of Delta infections in people over time. And you can see 4 months after full vaccination, the percentage is almost coming down to 50%. So there is waning, but it's also Delta is a stronger variant and able to break through past the vaccine. Notice again from this study that hospital admission prevention was still very, very high. Some of the best work has been done by the guy, Jonathan Stein from Bristol. He collected every study that's available to look at hospital effectiveness. Again, we're talking here about Pfizer. This one also talking about Pfizer. And the hospital effectiveness of the vaccine past 85%, usually past 90%. Okay, so let me summarize that for you. For AstraZeneca and Pfizer, the vaccine is very effective. It drops your chance of death or hospitalization by 10 times. But right now, it only drops your chance of infection by 3 times. What does that mean? 1 in 3 vaccinated people are probably going to get a breakthrough. I'm a very conservative individual with data. I don't over-exaggerate. I think the number is probably going to be, over time, probably 1 in 2, probably 50% of us are going to get a breakthrough infection the longer we are from our original vaccination. But the data very clearly shows that if you're vaccinated, you clear the infection faster, you have a milder disease, and you're less contagious. Okay? But it does mean that you cannot relax your SOPs just because you're vaccinated. What about Synovac? And that's in many people's minds. About 45–50% of our entire population is Synovac. Okay, pre-Delta, there's very good data showing that Synovac worked very well, as good as AstraZeneca and Pfizer. But since Delta came, both the Thai and Indonesian health ministries have become very nervous. They've seen their staff have breakthrough because they gave them Synovac, and they started giving them boosters. And we need to watch data from Sarawak, which is heavily Synovac, about almost 80% Synovac. And here's data from Sarawak, if I can summarize it for you. The blue line is hospitalization. And you can see that we started to see this rise hospitalization. It's become a bit more stable, but still not really settled. A lot of people still getting breakthrough infection. And if you look at the ICU numbers are still very high and actually still rising. Okay, the majority of these people who get admitted are actually vaccinated. About 70% of them are vaccinated, of the doctors. I understand that. We're waiting for a UNIMAS study that hopefully will come out this month that will give very detailed genome studies on all these people and give us a clear idea about Synovac. And I think we have to look to our own country for Synovac data because we won't get it from elsewhere. Here's another study from Malaysia, again, looking at millions of people who got vaccinated and looking at whether the different vaccines prevent ICU and hospitalization. I've highlighted the boxes to look at. This is fully vaccinated AstraZeneca, fully vaccinated Pfizer, fully vaccinated Synovac. And you can see that the prevention of ICU is pretty good for Pfizer and AstraZeneca, but not so good for Synovac. This data was not able to cut out the Delta section. I suspect if we had the Delta section, then this figure may even be a bit lower for the Synovac. Here again, hospital admission, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Synovac. Again, you see Synovac is not as good. Sorry, this is death, I apologize. Not as good against death or ICU admissions. So while we say that AstraZeneca and Pfizer, there can be breakthrough infections, they're still very protective against hospital admissions and ICU and death, but not so much with the Synovac data that we can see so far. In line with this, WHO SAGE committee, a very expert committee, has actually recommended that people over 60 start to get boosters if they had Synovac and Sinopharm. Again, they're watching the same data we are watching and become nervous. Okay. So what has Ministry of Health done? The Ministry of Health current policy is to give Pfizer to individuals, only Pfizer booster at the present moment. And there are two different things they're doing. First, they're giving a third dose. Now, a third dose is very different from a booster. A third dose is someone who did not respond well. And who don't respond well? Anybody who's immune compromised does not respond well to 2 doses. And this is very well seen by a lot of good studies overseas. Who's immune compromised is hard to say, but you know, people who are on drugs which are treating cancer, some people who got bone and joint problems are getting drugs to suppress it, especially those with what is called rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, SLE, and also people with uncontrolled diabetes. These are the groups of people who will not respond well to 2 doses of vaccine, should go straight away and get a third dose Pfizer. You just got to talk to your doctor, get a letter for them, and come and get a third dose. But at the same time, the Ministry of Health decided to give Pfizer, not AstraZeneca, Pfizer, to anybody above 60 and above who has got underlying health condition, looking at the data that's coming out, that these are the people who are more likely to get admitted if they have a breakthrough. And secondly, they decided to give all people who are working in long-term care facilities, because they don't want them to infect the people who are elderly living there. And they want to give healthcare workers. Why give healthcare workers, even if many of them are young? Because we don't want healthcare workers to get a breakthrough. It means that they can't come back to work for 2 weeks or 10 days. Also, that they pose a risk to the people that they're working with. So that's the reason they're vaccinating all the healthcare workers, which is going on right now. Paradox already started this. Okay, and of course, giving 1 dose to people previously infected with COVID. So right now, we're not giving boosters to the general public. We're only giving to these groups. And a booster is to boost your immunity. You responded previously, but we want to boost it even further to protect you. Do actually we need boosters? I'm not entirely sure looking at the data. I think that, we're going to get breakthrough, yes. But if you are under 60, I don't think so. But with Synovac, I'm uncertain. I'm hoping the study from UNIMAS will tell us about the younger people with Synovac, whether they need boosters or not. Okay, so I think international data is not really very clear. There's one fact that I missed there, which is this. One reason people are not pushing boosters very hard, even WHO is not pushing it very hard, is that if we use up all our vaccines for booster, it means other people have no access to vaccine. Who are we talking about? We're talking about poorer countries and countries like in Africa, for example. And if we don't support these countries as a global community, COVID will spread there widely. A new variant may turn up, and that variant may then come back to our countries, and that variant may damage us. We may get a new mutation that is actually able to resist vaccines. So it is in our best interest not to use up all our boosters. Maybe protect our older people and our health workers, but maybe give the rest of our vaccine away to countries that need it so that we can reduce the amount of COVID mutation that happen and don't have a mutation that come back. Recognize this is the major long-term risk right now, a new mutation happening to us. So what's the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals? This is a table I put together looking at the data for unvaccinated and vaccinated for 100 of each person. So if 100 unvaccinated people are infected today with Delta, 1 in 10 will need hospitalization, 10%, and half will end up in ICU. Whereas if you're vaccinated, 2 in 100 will need hospitalization. So we're not completely protected. And of the 2 in 100, 2% of them will end up in ICU. You should keep looking at the Singapore data, very, very good data looking at this. And I'm quoting Singapore data when I mention this here. So for that reason, and who are these people? These are largely elderly, 70, 80, past 60, especially people with diabetes, hypertension, heart disease are the ones who are getting this happen. A few young people, but not so many. What happens if you're unvaccinated? To you, 1 to 2 in 100 will die, higher if you overrun the ICU beds, as we saw in the Klang Valley. What about the vaccinated? It's 1 to 2 per 1,000. I suspect probably more in the 2 per 1,000, looking at the Singapore data. Okay. And also some of our own data from Malaysia. What about long COVID, the one that we worry most? I hope all of you have read and understand long COVID. These are people who, after getting COVID, whether mild or severe, struggle long term. They can't think properly. They can't go back to work. Some of them, their hearts and lungs and other organs are damaged. If you're unvaccinated, about 20-30% will get long COVID. If you're vaccinated, sadly, it doesn't seem to protect long COVID completely. The Israeli data showed that 20% of healthcare professionals got long COVID. But one good study from France, from healthcare workers as well, showed that the long COVID is very brief. It wasn't so severe. It cleared much faster. So again, some protection for long COVID, but not as much as I would like to have seen. Okay. So what do vaccines really do for you? I like this data from CDC. We showed graphically. And I heard this spoken very articulately by the Prime Minister of Singapore, Prime Minister Lee. He said, vaccine gives you a 30 years immunity youth. I like that. Pity it didn't make us younger physically as well. But actually, vaccine made you push you 30 years. So if you look at this graph here, the blue line is the deaths from people who are 80 years old and vaccinated. You are now comparable to an unvaccinated 50-year-old person. So vaccination changed you dramatically, push you down. So the whatever age you are, even if you are 50 years old, you're pushed down now to comparable to about a 20-year-old person. So a complete vaccination made you 30 years younger in terms of your entire risk of hospitalization, death. That's a very powerful risk to give to you when you compare. But you may want to remember this, from 10% to now maybe 2% hospitalization. So what is future? What's coming to us? I can't answer all of the Ming's questions because I don't know. I think only God knows this. I wish we had a roadmap, what's coming, and so we could prepare for it. And I'm going to share some experience from other countries. First of all, I'd like to say that herd immunity is no longer possible. We should stop using this word completely. It's not possible because Delta variant got breakthrough. So as long as there's breakthrough, there can be no herd immunity. Also, there is a sizable amount of vaccine hesitancy, people who still don't want to be vaccinated all over the world, including in Malaysia. Okay. If you look at Australian good studies and data, they said 70% of adult vaccinated tak cukup, 80% adult vaccinated, no good. They look at population. So the whole world now stops looking at adult vaccinated rate. They look at population vaccinated rate, and they say you need 90% of your whole population vaccinated before you end up with some minimum illness. And look at their minimum, they expect 5,000 deaths and 40,000 long COVID with 90% vaccinated. Still got problems, but at least a lot better. So stop using herd immunity, stop using adult vaccinated, think population vaccinated. And that is a target that we need to aim for if we want to come back to a slightly more open society where we can move around a lot more. Okay. Having said that, even though I said there's no herd immunity, I like this lovely study from Sweden, which looked at almost 2 million people, a lot of families, and they showed that if one person is vaccinated, this orange line, okay, if 1% of the family is vaccinated, then your risk of breakthrough infection in the family drops quite a bit. This black line is nobody vaccinated in the family. Even if 1% vaccinated, you actually protect your family. 2 persons, 3 persons, 4 persons. So actually every family member who gets vaccinated offers protection to those who are not vaccinated. This actually will apply in the church as well, if you think about it. When we meet, the vaccinated will help protect the unvaccinated. Because there's some people who cannot get vaccinated, children. There's some people who may not be able to get a vaccine because they're contraindicated. And of course, there's some people who choose not to vaccinate. So there is some degree of protection that we're offering to each other. Okay. So possible futures, as I said, hard to predict. It will depend on how much immunity we have from natural infection. That means how many people got the virus themselves, how long the vaccine will protect us and waning and boosters that we need, how much breakthrough is happening, and how much this can be transmitted to other people. What is our social behavior and contact like, how many people are vaccine hesitant? Are new variants coming, especially vaccine resistant one? Can we develop new drugs which are turning up? And can we develop this golden virus, which we hope, a pan coronavirus? That means works against all mutations, works against all type of coronavirus. People are working for this vaccine, and this is the one to end boosters. Okay. And finally, how much you accept. Are you okay if your 80-year-old father or grandfather dies or grandmother dies? Are you okay with that? A lot of people have to answer this question, okay, in terms of how much we want to accept. Then we can decide how much we want to open up. So most people think we're going to endemic. An endemic is like this orange line, kind of a horizontal, low grade, COVID in our community. But the real answer is going to go like that. It's going to go in cycles, just the cycles we've been seeing right now. There'll be a cycle for children, there'll be a cycle for old people, there'll be a cycle when boosters wane. So we are going to still see cycles. Hopefully these cycles are smaller with each time we see. But you can imagine if a new variant comes and is resistant, then we're going to have a huge upswing again and go back to square one, worse square one, as my wife says, because we have exhausted so much of our resources. So what's happening in Malaysia in terms of this? We have almost 67-68% vaccinated right now, about 21 million adults. We have no idea this group. I don't think the government knows how big is the unvaccinated adult group. I estimated at least 3 to 4 million because we don't know how many migrants or so in this group, especially the undocumented migrants that we've treated very poorly and now many of them are hiding. One good thing is that we've got 8 million people at least affected. We know 2.2 million infected. You can multiply easily by 4, so at least 8 million people are infected, and this form another very good reservoir, a pool of people who support our overall immunity. They are also probably vaccinated, but their immunity is probably better than the rest of us. Okay, they are vaccinated plus got infection. Now we are beginning to vaccinate these 3 million people. Okay, with vaccine. Already 2 million have been given 1 dose. These are our teenage children. We don't know when we're going to be able to vaccinate this group, the 7 to 11. We hope we can do that by December or January next year. We're not sure. And this group is the hardest to reach. The last 3 million, 0 to 6, we don't know when we're going to vaccinate them. So there's another 6 million people, children here that were unvaccinated, another probably 3 to 4 million individuals who are not adults not vaccinated. So we've got probably about 10 million Malaysians, I think, who are not vaccinated, which form a risk for us to continue getting outbreaks. Okay, so let me try and say what's going to happen to us and how much we can tolerate. Assume that 80%, we reach 80% vaccinated. Right now, remember, we are about 68%. I estimate that with vaccinating our teenagers, we can reach about 75% probably. That's about it. okay, then we will be stuck around there. So let's say we reach 80%, that's a number, and the 20% not vaccinated, mostly a lot of children here, but also adults, a mixture, maybe 50% children, 50% adults at this point here, okay? And after 1 year, if we have 1 in 3 breakthrough of this group of people, this is a number of infections we will have. Can you imagine that? 8.5 million infections, because now we're moving around, we've gone back to work, we've gone back to church, okay, we've gone back to school. Notice here in this group, there's a lot of infections as well, because I've estimated here 100% infection. Because if you're not vaccinated, you're going to get infected, full stop. Okay, only when you're vaccinated, you can prevent some infection. So recognize this figure here. The one reality is that more people who are vaccinated will get infected now than non-vaccinated, because there are more vaccinated people. Don't get frightened with this. You will see this data, and I'll show it to you in a moment. More vaccinated people will get infections than unvaccinated because there are more of them right now, and there are breakthroughs happening. But what's going to happen with hospitalization? 1 in 100 here, hospitalization. Here, I estimated 1 in 50. I was very kind, actually it's higher, and that's a number. So more people who are unvaccinated will get hospitalized, even though their numbers are smaller than the vaccinated. These numbers can be played around with. If I go to 2 here and I go down to 1 at 20 here, the numbers can change dramatically. But if this conservative number, remember Ahmad's conservative figure, this will amount to at least 10% of all our hospital admissions will be taken over by this, this thing. So even at the place we're going to by December, you can imagine that the next 1 year, 10% of our hospital admissions will be occupied by COVID. We're not going to go back to a smooth, normal health service. And this will be exhausting for our healthcare people, because every day in a normal non-COVID day, our beds are choked. Not just ICU, the normal beds are choked. So we will be stretched a bit more. So here's the data coming from our own country, looking at what I said down to you. The black line is, these are cases by vaccination status. The black line is the unvaccinated. The light green line is the partially vaccinated, and the dark green line is fully vaccinated. And you can see coming into October that the largest percentage of people who are getting infected now are the vaccinated, because they are the largest proportion of people and they're getting breakthrough. As this goes on, you will expect to see this to be the predominant group of people who are getting infected. Of course, there was some change in testing policy to affect this, but largely what I shared with you earlier. Okay. So how should we look at our infection? I want to teach you to change how you look. Our country is very focused on cases. Stop looking at cases, because we got a lot of breakthrough, and vaccinated people are going to break through, and we got a lot of vaccinated people. Okay, so you can look at 5 different things. We don't have data on long COVID, can't look sadly. Deaths, not fast enough for us to look. ICU numbers, I don't trust, because not everybody can get into ICU. Cases no longer useful. So this is the one to look at. New hospital admission, and go to COVID now. If you don't know COVID now, you must go to COVID now. Put up by 4 lovely individuals for free for us, 4 lovely tech young individuals. I'm in contact with them. Recently, I asked them to change this one. It was previously total hospitalization. Now is new hospital admission. They're very kind. Ministry of Health are very kind to change this. So let me show you what we want to do. We want to move away from looking at new cases to looking at new hospital admissions. This is the number you should look at in your own region. Okay. And let me show that to you right now. You can see that this is the number of new cases happening, a new hospital admission. Notice this side change here. The number has changed. I hope that this figure will also give us new hospitalization by vaccination status. I'll push for this next with this group. Okay, I like them. They're very responsive. And we want to see that by vaccination status as well. I want to tell you that if you watch Klang Valley and Selangor, look at this, what's happening. Just in the last 2 weeks alone, your hospitalizations are going up. I'm in Perak. I'm expecting mine to go up in the next 2-3 weeks. Why? Because of all the Merentas Negeri that's happening right now. We're going to start seeing, even today, when I went out to tapau food, a lot of outstation cars, a lot of people eating in food stalls like they have not seen food for a long time. I heard that, Concubine Street, which is a very popular tourist area, is full, so we're going to see this uptick. But you had it a bit earlier. I think you moved to phase 3 a bit earlier than us. And so your movement is a little bit forward. Now you're moving to phase 4. And so a lot more movement. So people are relaxing their guard. And, hospitalization is not the same as getting infected. Hospitalization means you're ill enough to require oxygen and might need an ICU bed. Okay. All right. So one reality that you must remember, I've said it many times, but I say it again. This is a reality. It's not a future possibility. We are going to get Delta breakthrough for a long time. All of us, many of us. okay, and some older people and a few younger people with hospitalization. The unvaccinated, of course, are very high risk because now the vaccinated won't protect them as much as we hope they will protect them, okay? So if you look at UK, that's happening right now. These are the previous graphs. This is the cases. Fortunately, the hospitalization and deaths are lower than before. But if you look very carefully at the UK data, you can see this rise here that's happening. They have a rise not just in cases, but rise in deaths and rise in patients admitted because you just get more and more people infected with breakthrough. Because UK has dropped their mask mandate, they allow people to mix, okay? And if you look there, the ambulance waiting time now is 7 to 8 hours. Hospital beds almost all occupied. And winter is coming. And that's not Game of Thrones winter. That's their real winter coming. And winter is when they get nasty viral infections. A lot of thousands of their staff also had breakthrough infections. Okay, so I think that's why they're all now working towards boosters. We're on par with them, actually, a bit slow in starting this. And we are on par, pushing our boosters a little bit earlier than they are doing so. The second reality, not a future possibility, a real reality, is a pediatric crisis that we are facing in our country right now. Thank God we are vaccinating our teenagers, but we are starting to see a Delta pandemic in children for the last 2 to 3 months. If you talk to all the pediatricians in the country working in Ministry of Health, they will say they are seeing children, they will tell you seeing children who are admitted. And there are two groups who are highest at risk. One, 0 to 5, and the teenagers. These are two highest risk group, 13 to 17, 0 to 5. Those are the ones who have deaths ICU. You can see the 0 to 5 deaths right now is 35%. We have had more than 100 children die. The number may not be very large compared to adults, but I think any child who dies is unacceptable to us and parents, very traumatic to parents. So for children who get infected, 100 will get hospitalized. The death rate, not sure yet, between this range, more if our ICUs are overrun. Remember, we have less children's ICU beds than adult ICU beds. They will get filled very quickly. And 1 in 10 children will get long COVID, maybe higher, not nice. So I estimate that this Delta wave in children will last 6 to 9 months. Why? Because we cannot vaccinate this group yet, and we don't know whether we can vaccinate the 0 to 5. So I'm keen, one, vaccine safety is assured that we start to move to vaccinating this group and then think about this group later. Previously, I was more conservative about vaccinating children. Now I've become more supportive of it because of this. If you open schools and kindergartens, including Sunday schools, you must think that this is going to be a major spread for us. We must consider that. So we need to fix the schools and kindergartens and Sunday schools properly before we open them to make them safer for children. I'll talk a bit how to do that later. So you can see this is not just my opinion. Here's what's happening in UK. You can see as they open up their schools, you can see this spike in the 10 to 19 and the 5 to 9-year-old. And they're seeing lots of children admitted. Their average admission is again 1 in 100, very much like what the data I suggested to you. Okay. Some countries seem to be doing okay. Okay. France, Germany, Sweden, Portugal, compared to UK doing okay, because they don't rely on vaccines alone. They call themselves vaccine plus strategy, and they're very responsible populations, especially France, Germany, Sweden, have very disciplined populations. Their plus strategy is they mask everywhere indoors or even on transport. They require vaccine passport to enter indoors. The only 3 persons who can enter indoors are: 1, you've been vaccinated; 2, you had previous infection with COVID; 3, you test negative. So they use testing a lot. They use testing extensively. We are not using it. And the testing is free, unlike ours where you got to pay. When you got to pay 16 ringgit, you think twice about testing. There, you just test, okay? And the test is, in 20 minutes, you get the answer, okay? RTK antigen test. They restrict high-risk activities, nightclubs and large events. They have invested extensively in ventilation and filtration this last 1 year. CO2 monitoring is compulsory, and they have fixed all their indoors, including their schools. The schools, they have kept children in bubbles and kept masks and kept distancing and fixed ventilation. So they have invested, which UK has not done so. So when you look at UK data, recognize that the weakness there compared to these countries which have methodically been pushing forward. We also have not done as well with testing and ventilation as these countries. What about Israel that Yin Meng asked me about? You can see their spikes over the years, and then they had this huge spike after vaccinating, and people got very, very nervous. Remember that this is cases, okay? When we went to hospital admissions, it was a lower spike. And again, they found that all these were largely old people, and they've gone to a very strong booster program for their country, and they're boosting actually a lot more than we are, not just the old people, but young adults as well. And they actually now plan to open for tourism. again, I'm not sure what's the next after this. COVID has surprised us too many times. This was a COVID surprise for many of us. So although they're planning to open up for foreign tourism, not just local tourism, I think we have to keep watching the data to see whether that booster works long-term or whether a new variant comes. What about Singapore, our neighbor that we look at very closely? Many of us watch Singapore data very carefully, and you can see that Singapore now has surpassed Malaysia in cases. This is cases per million people, and Singapore is doing worse than us right now. Okay, all breakthrough, much of it breakthrough. And don't worry about this busy slide, but it's showing you the rise in hospitalization and the rise in ICU numbers there. And they're really talking that their hospitals are becoming slowly overrun. If you watch and listen to their ministers talking, they're talking about that. Okay, again, the numbers are not small. It's about 1 to 2% of the cases that are going end up hospital, and then a small number end up in ICU, intensive care. But that number is enough. But you must remember one thing about Singapore. Singapore is COVID naive. They never had an outbreak like us. So they only had vaccination basically. Okay, but they're very high vaccination rates. So they've gone back to boosters like us. They're very strict with their mask mandate. They push their children back to online. They put some restrictions back on for in-dining. And I think we should be cautiously opening rather than have to do like Singapore. You know, if it happens like this to us, then we have to swing back to restrictions. I prefer a cautious opening rather than an aggressive opening, which we seem to be doing right now. Okay, so I think that I haven't answered one of Yin Ming's question well. Are we ready? But I think I have answered it indirectly. Yin Ming, I think we're not ready to open. I look at Singapore as a good test case. I look at Israel as another good test case. I look at these countries which are a lot more better prepared than us. I think we haven't put in place the things we need to do to open up better. And so I think we should open up cautiously. I'm going to stop right now and move back to Yin Ming.
Thank you very much, Amar, for giving us those real life statistics. And I think that these data are important for us as much as the economy is at stake and our country is opening it up very fast. But I think that being responsible citizen, I think we need to tread with caution, right? And try not to rush into dine in too frequent. I think we still have to keep to all the social distancing. I like the idea of some of the European country vaccination plus, you know, it's not just vaccination alone that we depend on. So much more. All right. Thank you so much for that. And next, we are going to move into the next part that have to do with church opening, which concern many of us. We know that Christians are looking forward to go back to church. Some are a bit cautious whether churches open, should I go back or not? And of course, another part is the leadership. I think church leadership are very concerned. If we want to open, we want to make sure that it's very safe for everybody. We do not want to have a church cluster. That will be very bad, you know. So that's why we are also treading with caution. So let's move on then to our next set of questions, how this will impact the church opening. Okay. So impact on church reopening. There are a few questions here. Question number one, as churches are preparing to open for church services, besides the normal SOP which we have been following, are there further safety measures we need to look into? And of late, there is an increasing talk about ventilation. Please enlighten us on this, especially with regard to church worship hall. What are the most basic things to look for? What would be the ideal setup for effective ventilation? What are some effective solutions or methods to ventilate or purify the air? What are practical steps would you recommend for a SOP compliant church? Is it necessary to have separate sitting for the fully vaccinated and unvaccinated churchgoers? And of course, currently, the government do not allow the unvaccinated, so we will have to follow the government directive. But if come to a point that the government allow, then we have to ask ourselves whether we need to have separate section for them. If yes, will it be seen as a form of discrimination, then making them feel bad, you know? And number four, is it necessary for those on duty, whether it's worship team, ushers in particular, because they are the one that's going to greet people, even though no handshake, to carry out COVID self-test before coming to church? Over to you, Amma.
Thank you, Ming. Again, very important and pertinent questions. Let me share some slides and we carry on. And let me talk first about these issues that you asked. And I think that the key principle in opening up church, the most important principle, is trust. We need not just the leaders, but the congregation to work together. So it's a responsible congregation. When I've talked to schools and kindergartens, I've talked how the parents and children have responsibility to their teachers just as much as the teachers have responsibility to their parents. And so same, I would say, the congregation has a responsibility to the leaders just as much as the leaders have responsibility. The leader's job is to make sure the church premises are safe. The congregation's job is to make sure they are safe and don't bring some COVID infection to the church. Okay, so trust. I'll talk a bit. Maybe I'll show the slide now. Here's what I mean by trust. If this is a church service that we're going to have, and this is members, and these are the pastoral team, we need to protect this place, both our family as well as our workplace here. Okay, if we are lax here, then no matter what you do here is pointless, because you're going to bring back a COVID infection and infect everybody in here. So the trust is actually that we are maintaining good SOPs. As In Ming says, I would not dine in yet. I have not dined in yet. Complete. Even they make it available, I'm not going to do it. Okay, because it's just not safe yet to do in dining, because people have not fixed their premises to make them safe for us. So yet I see a lot of people doing it even today in Ipoh. So fix our own family safety so that we can protect the church safety, and that of course applies to the pastoral team. The second thing is every church should have a designated supervisor. I think one probably not enough, not cukup. 2 or 3 would be good. One person who's going to, or 2 people are going to be responsible to oversee the implementation of safety measures, to monitor the sustainability of these, and to read and look for change, because COVID is not static. We may need to do more. At one point, we thought it was droplet. Now we know it's airborne crisis. So change is happening, and there may be more coming, the data and science. So somebody who probably staff members who we invest a bit of time, your job is to do a bit more reading every day, or every week we give you some protected time to do a bit more COVID reading and stuff like that. But implementation of changes. And finally, you need to monitor transmission in the community, because this is the biggest risk to you. If, as I said, hospital admissions are going up in your state, then you may want to pull back to a hybrid meeting, maybe go back to live stream and not have physical meetings yet. Okay, so these are the 3 key pillars, I would say, in moving forward, the 3 key principles. Let's talk about some of the mechanics. Before I talk mechanics, yes, Yin Ming says we have to follow the National Security Council and Ministry of National Unity, which issue guidelines. These are phase 3 and 4 guidelines. I neglected phase 2 because all states are now phase 3 and phase 4 coming from Monday. So for attendance, they've only allowed vaccinated. I don't agree with this, but this is their stance. Okay, they're not allowing children to attend. So again, that not encourage doesn't mean cannot, but they obviously recognize the risk to children that I talked about from the Delta pandemic. Okay, so they're not encouraging. The numbers attending depending on the size and the physical distancing. I would say the physical distancing is no longer the criteria indoors. It is your size and your ventilation that you do. Okay, so I don't exactly agree with this criteria. 1 meter alone not enough, but you'll have to follow this 1 meter indoors. Then the schedule time is about not too different, not much of a bother to us. This is probably the most important statement they made: immediate departure, end of service. And this is the biggest risk. When you come and you chit chat, when you leave and you chit chat, that's when the biggest risk of spread is there. And of course, they have said no food, only can distribute packed food. So these are some of their guidelines here, also available on the NECF website, very nicely put there. Okay, so let's talk about the different things that we can do to make church safe. The first is you will optimize your personal immunity, and that's vaccination. I think if you're not vaccinated, please get vaccinated, unless you cannot get vaccinated for some reason. It changes your risk so much. You may have read a lot of Facebook or WhatsApp or Telegram messages. I still see a lot of videos and messages, a lot of fake news circulating. Sometimes I get exhausted watching all of it. But I must tell you that vaccination works. There are problems with vaccination, sure, and we can talk about that if we need to. There are side effects of vaccination, but vaccination, as I said, drops your risk by 30 years in terms of age, and that's fantastic. Okay. Should we limit church attendance to only the vaccinated? Now, this is a very difficult ethical decisions. They are really being discussed overseas. I read quite a few discussions in different ecumenical churches and Catholic churches and Baptist churches and so on. And some have made a decision: you cannot attend church unless vaccinated. The whole church organization has come up with that. Sometimes local church, sometimes actually the whole national church body has come up with that. We are trying to balance the right of individuals who decide not to get vaccinated with the safeguard of the rest of the congregation. We're trying to, so this is a very difficult balance. And I leave this to the leadership to think about it. We must recognize that our church is full of a lot of older members and also perhaps a higher rate of vaccine hesitancy. I notice that church members tend to be more vaccine resistant or hesitant than non-church individuals. So we've got these peculiar problems. Some churches overseas have mandated that all staff must be vaccinated. That's a minimum. Okay. Others have said we will limit our attendance based on the rate of vaccination of the whole church. So they don't look at community vaccination rates, look at church vaccination rates. So you need to know your own vaccination rates for this to happen. So if your vaccination rates in your church are only 30%, I think you're having a high risk to open up. But if your church vaccination rates are 90%, oh, you're much better than the community. Okay. Remember, we're talking about children here as well. Okay. Looking at the recommendations to not encourage under 12. So, if you're allowing teenagers, then you look at that, at least that proportion. My personal opinion, and I will say it's a personal opinion, I do not believe that we should limit anyone who wants to come to church, vaccinated or unvaccinated. But we have to take in guard the protection of the other individuals, and I'll give you some ideas how we can do that. Okay. Of course, there may be an opinion from the vaccinated. Some of our church members may strongly say, we don't want, Pastor, we don't want these unvaccinated people to come. And we'll have to discuss through this whole issue of how we relate to each other. Okay. I know that in the Ministry of Health, they are not tolerating any staff member unvaccinated. Same with teachers. They're not allowing any teacher to teach in the Ministry of Education who's unvaccinated. Okay. What about segregated seating for vaccinated, unvaccinated? Now, who are the high-risk people? The high-risk people are those who cannot vaccinate it, they choose not to vaccinate, or the vaccinated elderly. I'm past 60, I'm calling myself elderly here. And of course, those with diabetes, hypertension, past 60. But there's also one more group, children who need the protection because they're not vaccinated yet. So I suggest we keep them in bubbles. Should we keep them in bubbles and segregated? I think yes, we should, but I don't think we should segregate the way of vaccinated, unvaccinated. Okay, the group I'm most worried about is young people. Why? Because they're mobile. Look at us older individuals. We might go to church, we come home, we are maybe retired, we might go and tap out some food. We don't actually go to a busy workplace. But if you're a young working individual, you got back to work, you gone back to your workplace, your risk is the highest to get a breakthrough infection, which then may bring back to church and spread. So I think consider breakup things. And this is how I think a church service could look like. We're all meeting together in one church service, but you're using separate halls or separate rooms. In this group, there are some pastoral team members here, and these are our older members, vaccinated or unvaccinated, doesn't really matter. Here, the younger members, the one who I think are highest risk to us, who might get a breakthrough easiest, and again, vaccinated, unvaccinated together. And here, lastly, the families with children, we put them together, vaccinated, unvaccinated. This is how I would segregate, not by vaccination, unvaccinated, but by risk. This one because highest risk of dying, this one because highest risk of bringing infection, this one again because children and families, probably better to put them together because we don't want children to be infected. So think this is one way we can do the segregation. Different airspace is important. These places must not be linked by aircon, otherwise it's pointless to do this. Okay, so if you're a higher risk individual, I would suggest you also place people near, if you're not following this style, you've got a smaller church, you can't afford to do this, I would suggest you choose to sit people near the open door or window. Okay, but you got to watch the draft. If the air is being sucked out that window or door, then don't sit there because you're highest risk there. But if it's not, then you sit near the best ventilated place. Or maybe you have more than one service a bit quieter, less people, maybe opt to go for the quieter service. And maybe you can run that quieter service for higher risk people, busier service for younger individuals and so on. What about these physical plastic barriers between our seats? The plastic perspex barriers, don't use them. If you put them in place, take them away. The data is now very clear that they hinder airflow, and we don't want to use that as a physical distancing between people. They are not reliable, and you see them in Parliament, and they should not be in Parliament. In Parliament, actually, they're building up the particles of that individual there, and actually not allowing the air to be clean. It's actually building up the particles of the infected individual in that area. Okay. What about size of service? I think you should limit the size of service. And one thing you should do is continue to offer a hybrid option, which means there must be a video link for services. Some people may be unable to come. Some may be uncomfortable to come attend in-person service. If you offered me in-person service today, I would think twice. I think probably I will still be at home for a while. I will watch the data and the science and the situation in the region. Okay, so some people may be like that. They may not be so keen to want to come in. I believe this is a long-term option for us, because there are always people in our congregation who are unable to attend because they're disabled or otherwise, or have a child or an adult that they care for. And live streaming to them long-term is something that I would like us to keep, that COVID has offered us. Okay. Secondly, another option is in interim, consider an outdoor service, even if you're offered. I know some churches in Penang are doing this. They are offered, when they can go back, they're going back to outdoor service. They're using a car park, early morning, outdoor. Again, put the highest risk people on the edge of the crowd. Even outdoor, I will still use mask, by the way. It's not maskless, it's still mask service, but on the edge of the crowd. The other ones are all, I've talked, it's all mask, by the way. Okay, I'll come back to mask in a moment. The size of meeting, of course, depends on our national guidelines, but I think it's more, as I said, the ventilation, multiple, I've talked about that. Keep your service short. Please, right now, keep your service short. Very, very precise. Everything is short. Keep your worship short. Keep the message short. And as I said, the biggest risk is the mingling before and after your meeting, which you need to control and encourage people to leave immediately. And we have not seen each other for ages. So we want to talk. We want to say hello. And this is going to be the difficulty, managing this one. Okay. What about masks? I think you should wear masks all the time indoors in the church. Whether you are vaccinated, unvaccinated, or children, as long as a child can wear a mask, give them a mask. I no longer am happy with 3-ply surgical masks. They are okay to prevent you infecting other individuals, but they're not good enough to prevent you getting infected, because they have a 30–40% leak. So you breathe, you speak, a lot of your saliva and your particles are stopped. But when you breathe in, air comes in from the side, and that's your airborne risk is still there. So please change and consider better fit. My wife has pointed out that some of the surgical masks now have changed their design. And I like the very nice design. They've gone to this kind of design. It's a new design. This actually came from Korea. This, of course, is not a surgical mask. This is a N94, K94 South Korean mask, which is almost like an N95 mask. Very, very breathable. It's a nano weave mask. And I use a face shield as well. Okay. So optimize your mask. I would say that anybody who's past 60, who's got a comorbid, who's higher risk person, please actually come with a N95. The Korean people are good. Again, there's a lot of fake masks, and you need to do some work to get. Koreans have got a website up which tells you which masks are real and which are not. And locally among the doctors, we circulate who we think are the reliable salesperson. Consider a face shield as well for the higher risk people. Don't eat and drink in church, full stop. This is when you unmask. This is the most dangerous thing. So should we give communion? I think when you first start opening, don't do communion. Don't do it all right now. I would love to get back to communion, but I think once you unmask, you actually are going to breathe in air and increase your risk. Toilets are another risk. If you can avoid using, use a toilet just before you come, okay? If you need to use, don't unmask them. Please make sure all your toilets got exhaust fans put in place. And when you flush, please put the lid down, because when you flush, you aerosol, that actually puts a lot of particles in the air. And we know that urine and other body fluids actually can spread the virus. Okay. Don't put all your eggs in the vaccine basket. Okay, we must use other measures like these countries are teaching us. Okay. What about testing? Singapore calls it pre-event testing. I like that word, pre-event, any event testing. I'm pushing for pre-workplace testing once a week. I'm pushing for preschool testing once a week with the government. The ideal is twice a week, but once a week is the minimum. Okay. First of all, I would say for testing for church, if you're unwell, don't come. I hope these people follow this rule. Secondly, if your family unwell, you don't come as well. If your child is having a runny nose and fever, you don't come. There are 7 key symptoms of COVID. By the way, everything I'm saying here about the church is in that church file that I talked about in the link that I've given you, and plus that other files that I think are useful. Huh? And this link of this study is there. These are the other things: smell, taste, fever, cough, chills, appetite loss, muscle ache, sore throat. These are the ones that are things that suggest you got COVID. Secondly, I would think if you have the money, if you can work with one of the suppliers, if you can bring the price down a bit, test everybody before the service. It gives a great amount of reassurance. These RTK antigens right now are highly reliable. I would test everybody, vaccinated or unvaccinated. In Europe, they're slowly moving to only testing the unvaccinated. But I think with breakthrough, that's not really a smart thing to do. You should test everybody if you want. You're meeting once a week. You're going to invest and see whether this is possible, maybe part paid by the congregation, but the poorer people, the people who come from poorer backgrounds will need our support. This is not a cheap thing, okay? Should we test at church or test at home? It's a trust issue, isn't it? Testing at home is easier. We all test and then come. But some people don't trust this. I leave you to decide this. Huh? Testing at church, you have to queue up and get testing. And then when you build a queue, you actually bring people together, which I don't like so much, unless you have multiple testing queues where you can test very quickly and go in. Huh? All right. Again, don't forget poorer members. Saliva-based tests require proper collection for good results. So remember that the nose test, even though we don't like it, more uncomfortable, it's more reliable than saliva-based tests, because saliva-based tests require some criteria to follow before you do it. If you want to do this one, you follow all the proper criteria and do it right. But for children, this is probably a bit easier than adults. Now, the key, one of the most important things I want to say to you, and I hope that you will listen and communicate. I've got one file on this, on ventilation, filtration, is ventilation, ventilation, ventilation. This is the most important thing. And we don't know what to do, most of us. I've tried to summarize all the useful things, what works, what to buy, and so on. Okay? And I think, although we still think about surfaces, it's air that we're most interested in. It's airborne that we're most interested in. So indoor 1 to 2 meter means nothing to me. Okay, if somebody is in the same room with me, I'm sharing his viral particles as long as we're there for a couple of minutes, especially with Delta. Okay, so there are 3 ways to reduce airborne transmission. You can mix and match this. You don't have to be one only, but there are 3 ways. The first and the best is to bring in fresh air. It's ventilation. This is the real ventilation. You bring in fresh air. The second is filtration. We suck in the viral particles and filter out clean air and bring that air back into the room. And thirdly, sterilization. We sterilize the air. Let me talk about each of these. So first is fresh air. The minimum you want to do is 5 times to exchange the whole air in the room every hour. And there are calculators for this, and I will give you some ideas how to think about this through. This is the best approach because you're bringing fresh air in. Now, when you bring fresh air in, people are suggesting that even that fresh air that you're sucking in, you can use an exhaust fan to suck in that air. You can put a filter there. You can put a HEPA filter, so you suck in clean air. Long term, that even is good for the congregation because our air is polluted, and also we bring less pollen and other things in. So you open your doors and windows, you avoid any cross draft. You don't want a draft in the room which brings viral particles from one person to another. You put a fan at the window, but better to mount an exhaust fan. There are some ideas about this as well. I'll show them. And you can suck air out of the room, or you can suck air in the room. Either way is fine. Okay, I've seen both methods being used. Okay. If you suck air out of the room, then you're not using a filter. If you're sucking air into the room, then you try and use a filter on the exhaust fan. Long term, you need to consider investing in putting in an exhaust fan into the wall. Some people are using their sliding door, and they cut out a hole in the sliding door and put a fan there. I've seen that for some US facilities. Okay, you stop recirculating air by aircon. This is messy, isn't it? Huh? Again, this is for people who have got an open hall with windows and doors. Closed room, very susah. So if you still want to use the aircon, you need to put in HEPA filters into your aircon, and you need to check with the person who supplied the aircon, can this happen or not? Can they work or not? Can they go in? And the HEPA filters will need to be changed after some time, often 6 months. You need to know this kind of criteria. That's why I say you need a COVID supervisor there. Keep your total exhaust fans on, and you need to buy a CO2 monitor, a reliable one. And you want to keep your CO2 down below. Some people say 800, some say 600, somewhere in that range. Okay, that's a proxy. CO2 is a proxy indicator. This CO2 monitor is best, the final judge is when everybody is inside the room. So probably good to bring the leadership team and other people inside to check what it's like. With come people inside, and finally you must check it all the time when the congregation is inside. There are a whole range of CO2 monitors. Now, why do I say 5 to 6 times? Because there is very, very good data that if you exchange the air 5 times, you know, your risk of COVID drops more than 90%. US has gone for 6 times, drop it by 95%. Okay, all right. You can go higher, of course, but the problem is the mechanics of doing it so much higher. So 5 to 6 times air exchange, the whole room air exchange every hour reduces your COVID risk by 90%, which is a very powerful risk. Okay, CO2 monitors you buy. Okay, and I'll give you a link where to buy good ones from. Okay, and that's the proxy indicator if you want. Okay, Malaysian guidelines is not 5 to 6, but 10 liters per second per person. I prefer the 5 to 6 because it's easier to think through the mechanics of this idea. Okay, the second method we can do is for closed room, but you can use number 2 also in an open room. Okay, but if you only have a closed room, then you need to reduce the viral particles in the air, which means you're doing filtration. It's reasonably effective, almost as good as number of the first one, if you use the right unit. So you must buy a reliable portable air cleaner, either with HEPA filters or with high MERS filters. So basically, filters come in different MERS rating. The minimum you should buy is 13, 14 MERS, okay? But many people say maybe move to 17, where HEPA filters start. HEPA filters start at MERV 17. But US recommendations, at least MERV 13, 14 will filter about 75% plus. When you reach 17, you reach filter about 99% plus of viral particles. So you got to choose which level and what your capability and funding is, okay? Now, there are DIY options for this. I'll talk a bit about that. But you must remember that these are mechanical devices. They're running inside there. You need enough to clean the air. Again, you still have to do 5 to 6 change of the air in the room every hour. Huh? So you must run at a certain speed, a certain volume. So there's noise to be here. So some of them you cannot put at full speed. You may have to put at moderate so you can cope with the voice. Now, otherwise, this is competing with the pastor who is preaching or the worship team and so on. Okay, so you got to look at these kind of issues, right? So there are portable air cleaners on the market. They range in 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 ringgit, depending what you want to buy, even more expensive one. Okay, but this is a low-cost device. It's called a Corsi Cube. Okay, designed by this gentleman Corsi, and has been modified as well. There is this lovely review which has been done by University of Melbourne, where they look at a lot of different portable air cleaners. This file is available for you in the literature I've given you, and you can see if you want to buy here, cheap but effective. There's some nice devices there, some by Xiaomi, some by Filter, some Philips, some by Samsung, where they have a large volume of air output, okay, meter squared per hour, but their price is not, this is Australian ringgit, by the way, huh? Here, okay. So you want to see how much air they can clean, and you must make it enough for the room, and you must be a maximum tolerable noise, and the cost must be there. And University of Melbourne was very strict. They only reviewed HEPA filters, okay. So this is the Corsi Tube. Some people in Malaysia are also building it. Overseas, many people are making this Corsi Tube. I've given a link in the notes on one of the local Malaysian engineer, which I'm in contact with. He's taught me quite a bit about ventilation as well. And he's building this for schools. He's able to make this for less than 300 ringgit a piece. Okay, this is actually, I just saw a good review from the US, and this is actually better than some of these. This Corsi Tube is better than these fellas. They're only 200-300 ringgit compared to 1,500 ringgit. Huh? The filters may last a bit shorter, maybe about 5-6 months. Some of these filters have got sensors. They can tell you when to change. Might last 9 months, but still, for the cost, I think it's worthwhile. Okay. Again, inside this link, he's given ideas how to do this in the country, and he's using this kind of wall ventilation fans, because in Malaysia we have difficulty finding these box fans, which the US have a lot of. Okay. But maybe some of you are businessmen and businesswomen and be able to bring in some of this into our country as well. Finally, sterilize the air. A lot of people are going for this option. This is not the primary option. Okay. You can use it in addition to A and B, but all the data I read said this is an adjunct. Adjunct means add-on, not primary. There are 2 ways to sterilize the air. Most people are using ultraviolet C. The best way is to put it into the air duct. So you've got central aircon. You talk to an engineer, he comes and put an ultraviolet thing into the air duct. Nobody's entirely sure how well this works because, air has to be slowed down. The virus has the light has to shine and kill the virus, and then it goes on. Okay, a lot of companies are pushing upper room UVC, centralized or upper room UVC. Okay, this thing, and let me talk a bit about both of these. Now, this is the classical UVC. This one is being used in hospitals and other places. They don't use it when you're there. They use it to sterilize the room after you've left. They bring this unit in. Everybody temporarily leaves the room. They shine this light because it's a little bit toxic. It's UVC, but it's still toxic. And then after about 15, 20 minutes, they consider this place clean and they take it out. It's one way to decontaminate the room. And you might want to use a similar kind of device. There are many on the market. I can't review those for you. I apologize. But some of the local doctors have bought for their clinic. In the evening, they put it on after they've gone back to work to sterilize their clinics, okay, space. Okay, but the best way, as I said, is to take some of this and put into your aircon duct, and that works. But you need to work with your engineer on how that works. Okay? Again, I'm looking at Federal Drug Authority, FDA, US guidelines here. So people have moved to this one, upper room UVC germicidal irradiation. You put this kind of unit up there. It says here, they say it's safe up here. It doesn't affect the people down here. Your ceiling must be high enough. But I've read 2 very good reviews on this. They say lack quality data from experiments, consider only as an adjunct, cannot be used as primary. So if you're going to put this in your church, you're going to do nothing else because you got a closed room and you just want to use this. I want to say that you are not sufficiently protecting your congregation. And if you're doing it in an office or whatever, it's not good enough. One reason they think it doesn't work very well is because we don't know how the air circulates in this room. You are breathing down here, you're assuming your hot air goes up, but it may not. The hot air may be going laterally as well with the draft. Okay, this works very well with TB germs. Right? There's not enough data for coronavirus at the present moment. Okay, but might be useful as an adjunct, especially if you know your flow in the building. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, ventilation, filtration, or sterilization. As I say, you can mix an option. Best, number A, if you have open hall with windows. B, you have to use this if it's closed. And C, you can use an adjunct to AB, but don't use alone. And there's still some small concerns of safety there that you need to read a bit more about this, okay? I think that if you're using an open hall, like many churches have, or windows and doors, then I would probably do A plus B. And many of the US organizations are doing A plus B to boost it. Okay. All right. Now, what about others? There's so many devices on the market right now that you can get swamped. And they're promoting all sorts of stuff. These are 2 from Yin Meng. She asked me about them, so I'm just talking about these 2. Now, be discerning. There must be independent reviews. I don't read company review alone. I must say other people say this product is good. And then look at the mechanism of action. Now, this one is using some natural products which are bactericidal. They kill bacteria and probably viruses as well. They're probably okay for surface. They're probably no use for air. There is no possibility. Notice in this tree here, I didn't talk about sterilizing the air in any other way. I don't talk about spraying some chemical in the air. There's insufficient data for that to work. So a lot of people are going into that. They're spraying the air, but how often are you going to spray? Are you going to spray while your members are there? If you want to spray something, you spray all the time while your members are there. Can you imagine using alcohol spray, for 5 hours or 2 hours when your members are there? I think everybody will breathe in alcohol. So we can't use that. Similarly, like this, people are using liquid air humidifier, steam, and mist spray. I think don't buy this. These are not reliable for protection. So all the ones that are producing a humidified air, which they say will reduce your COVID spread, don't believe in those. There's no data that I can find doing that. Trust that Melbourne review, especially the one I talked about. Go and read the whole thing. It's quite good. And they said one statement: ionizer, plasma, ozone, photocatalyst oxidizer, precipitator, UV purification, distillation, all unproven, untested, may be dangerous, don't use. Okay. And these people do their science for this. So I leave you with this kind of thinking from these individuals. So I've got this list of useful resources in the document. Besides writing all that I've talked about in 3 pages, I left these guidelines for you. I want you to consider this calculator. This is a Harvard calculator, which helps you calculate how much air exchange you need in a room. They developed it for schools, but you can use for any building. Okay, this review from Spain tells you which are the best CO2 monitors. And I already told you, this fella, K-Moon, you cannot buy $5,000 CO2 monitor or 2,000 ringgit CO2 monitor. Okay, K-Moon is the one most of our doctors are buying. It's cheap and reliable. Okay, again, look for a good supplier on Shopee or Lazada to buy that. Again, because people always, are selling fake products. Okay, there is this University of Melbourne review which I talked about. And finally, I want you to watch this video. If you watch nothing else, you watch this video. This is a bunch of people who are talking how they fix their classrooms in the US. They went through bit by bit, how I calculate my airspace, what device I did for this room, for that room, and so on. Very nice people, about 25 minutes. Might be worthwhile for anybody who's becoming a COVID supervisor or thinking about your church to watch this lovely video. Okay. You cannot return to school, you cannot return to your workplace, you cannot return to church if you don't fix ventilation, I would say. And I think ventilation must be a way of life post-COVID. UK is producing this right now. It's a checklist for people about every place, every shop, every coffee shop, every office, every building you're entering, what is the ventilation status evaluated, and they give you a color code and a sticker and tell you what you want to do. Okay. All right. Now, one or two other things before I stop again. What about singing? Can we sing? We recognize that singing, loud talking, wind-blown instruments all spread COVID. I would say that the worship and music team, if they want to lead worship from the front, because they'll be unmasked at that time, they should all be tested. This is the minimum testing I would expect. Yinming, I do agree with you that if you have people at front who are working as ushers and the pastor, all these people must be tested at least minimum. That I expect as a normative. I didn't even mention it because in my brain that it's guaranteed that the whole staff team will be tested every week because they're leading from the front and leading and ushering here and there. But as I said before, I think the whole congregation should be tested if you can work it out. But minimum the worship team. Huh? The congregation should still refrain from singing. Oh, messy, this one. Look at what Amma is saying. Huh? Other people sing, we listen. Worship in the end, of course, is from the heart. And I think music helps. And the worship team can help move us to bring us closer to God. So worship team probably from the start, but the rest of us still mask and refrain from singing at the present moment. Okay. What about preaching? Preaching, of course, is a risk to others because you're preaching, and you don't know how that airflow is going to others. So must test before. Again, the physical barriers we don't like so much anymore. But for a what should I say? For a podium, I'm less restrictive about it. But maybe just a face shield, a good quality face shield that the pastor may wear at that time. Maybe good to limit how much of his airborne spread goes to others. Again, keep the sermon short, and consider all your announcements are not made, they're made digitally to the congregation, so you save time keeping the whole service brief. I'm going to stop there, Yinming, and come back. I hope I've answered most of what you need.
Thank you so much. Right, and I believe some of the questions asked by the viewer here is regarding to what you have talked just now. We will bring it up after this final session. The final two questions rather, is still related to reopening of churches, but more specific. Besides worship services, how about youth group, Sunday school, and children church? Is it safe for this ministry to open up as well, or should there be different phases of resuming? And what about home fellowship cell group? In your opinion, are we ready to resume this kind of activity? How can we meet in small group and still be safe? What are some of the safety measures to observe in the home cell group? Over to you.
Thanks, Yinming. And I think I put it separately with Yinming because I think it's good to think of this separately. And I apologize, it's taken more time than I expected, but I wanted to be thorough with you. Again, for Sunday school, I suggest finding this document from the link that I posted. So I would consider Sunday school our regular schools, except the duration is shorter and the classes are often smaller. As I said earlier, you need a trust relationship with the teachers and the family, so you've got safe behavior at home and you're not bringing things to the school. And the trust relationship also means that if you become positive, you should tell the congregation. I forgot to mention that earlier. I apologize. I missed that completely out. If one congregation member is positive, you must tell the pastor immediately. Because then we've got to think of your risk. You've come to church, now you're positive. we need to maybe consider telling other church members. You mustn't be shy to tell people we are positive because we want to protect them and they may want to go for testing. So the useful measures for a Sunday school is class safety bubbles. We don't mix children from different classes, full stop. That teacher and that class are one unit. They come and they go. They don't mix with the other children, so that if one person gets infected here, we don't actually affect the others, and we keep their air space separate from the others. Again, so their whole aircon and air systems are different from the others. If you can vaccinate staff, of course, done. Children, definitely we should encourage everyone 12 to 17 to vaccinate, and that adds an added protection for the older children who are attending Sunday school or youth ministry. Optimized ventilation, all the things I've talked about must be happening in the individual classrooms for children. And finally, routine use of masks for all children. I think these are the basics I will use in Sunday school. But don't forget what the National Council has said, that they don't encourage people under 12 from coming, and we think about the risks and watch the data as it's going. I think it's safer for you to bring back first adolescent and youth groups first, because they're going to be vaccinated. Bring these back first, rather than the younger Sunday school. I know the children want to come back, but this safer one to go. And then slowly, I think church will be open in gradual steps, and move that way. Okay. If you are opening a younger age group, again, I would suggest this is one thing, as I'm suggesting for kindergartens and primary schools. I've been suggesting to MOE and MOH that we should do RTK antigen for all children when they're coming back. So perhaps you could invest in this if you want to protect our children better. Again, we have to figure out how to get this done properly, safely, and who's going to bear the cost for this. This is one way to open Sunday school for younger children safely. What about home fellowship? They're definitely safer than congregational meetings. So if you want to open a gradual church and you're not ready to come back as a large group, come back first as a small group. But I would segregate members. The socially mobile, people who are low risk of hospitalization, but more likely to get infected because they go to work, I will segregate them into one group or into groups. That means, these are young, working, mobile individuals. They've got their own cell groups. And then the other groups are the higher risk members by age and comorbidity. And as I said, families, and a third group. Again, the same groups that I mentioned earlier. So you classify your cell groups. You may have to reorganize your cell groups your home groups according to this kind of groups, okay? Because these are the ones who may spread it. And don't mix the groups. This means a pastoral team cannot move between groups. If you want to move between groups, then I think you make sure you get tested properly before moving between groups, okay, as to protect your groups. So the groups keep to their same groups as it is. The precautions I have with groups, right now, masking, unpleasant, isn't it? We come for home small group masking. How to avoid masking? Everybody tests. If you want to do away with mask in a small group, then everybody get a test before coming. This is one way you can do away with a mask. But even then, I would say consider masking as a more effective measure than just a test alone. You must fix your ventilation in the house that you're meeting. So this is a house meeting. You have to look at windows, doors, but you need portable air purifiers. So somebody got to come, think through the mechanics, bring in a CO2 monitor, think about this home, and think about getting a unit. Whether these units are loaned, so maybe you have a couple of COSI cubes or other things that you've got together, and we loan them out to different people. So one cell group meets on Monday, another on Tuesday, another on Wednesday, has a means to share out air purifiers, a possibility. But you need quite a number of these. No eating or drinking when you meet. Again, try to avoid use the toilet in the house. No singing, and keep the meeting short. This is how I think a small group can meet safely. But definitely, this is a much safer group to meet than the large group meeting. Okay. Now, Yunming, let's stop here. I was going to say something, but let's take questions. I think we need questions at this time. We have gone on for too long.
All right. Before we pick up the question from the floor, just two things come to my mind. You were discouraging people from singing. We understand, but let's say in the church, if they are masking, it will be since they are masked. Why is it that it's still not to sing? And also, if let's say in the home group, you say that they all do the test, and if all are tested negative, so what's wrong with them singing?
Yeah, I think that singing is a forceful activity. If you try and sing with a 3-ply mask, you're definitely going to leak out the side. You're definitely going to spread. If you sing with an N95 tight mask, I think you have difficulty singing because you're going to have difficulty breathing properly as well. So it's a type of mask that you're using in church that will determine whether you can sing or not sing. And definitely a 3-ply surgical mask is not safe to sing with. And can everybody afford an N95 mask? Can everybody wear a proper, even KN94 mask? They're not always the easiest to wear. That's why I'm saying this. There's going to be leak. For the home, yes, it can remove the mask and you can sing, but I think that you need to consider your risk. No test is foolproof. There are risks. So as long as everybody is vaccinated. Maybe these are older people who already receive a booster, even higher thing, and then you meet and then you all are tested. I think your chance of getting infection are quite low. Again, it's a matter of risk. But you're meeting with children, most cannot be vaccinated. I think then, the whole dynamics change. So I think individual groups have to decide the risk benefit for them. Okay. Similarly, like I said, I'm not prepared to go to in-dining right now because it's not fixed. Maybe they fix in-dining properly. They showed me their CO2 monitor, their ventilation is good. I might prepare to go back to dining because I would love to eat out rather than always tapao food. It's never the same. Huh? Okay. And I want to support businesses as well. So same with our small group, we need to evaluate the risk. Some more, Yin Ming?
Okay. Besides the church opening, what do you think of water baptism? Because our churches, we conduct water baptism by immersion.
Yes.
So do you have any talk on this?
Sure. I think don't use the same water. So some of us have baptismal pools where one after another, the people come and get baptized. And when you're baptized, water goes in your nose, in your mouth, it's going to come out as well. Some secretion come out. You're going to spread COVID in that environment. So use separate baptismal devices. So one option is to move to a sprinkling or another, something not so immersion. But if you need to immerse, then you use separate tubs which are clean in between persons that you're using it. Okay.
Okay, good. There is the government's guideline is that children are not encouraged to attend church. And I think likely many churches are not resuming the children's classes yet. But what if parents bring their children? Should we allow it?
So it's not a hard cannot come. It's a soft don't encourage, because they know that the pandemic is spreading among children right now. So perhaps we should advise the congregation that your children may get infected. The risk is not very high compared to adults, but there is a risk. You need to be responsible for that. We don't want a church member then to say, oh, how come I got it in your church? And Pastor, how come you didn't protect us from that? There's no way any pastor or leader can ensure 110% protection of their church premises. Okay, even if they do the best of what I've talked about just now. Similarly for workplace, similarly for a coffee shop or a restaurant, nobody can give us 100%. So parents must be willing to take that risk if they come. I'm reluctant to turn people away who want to come and worship and be with the body of Christ, but we must know the risk. Sometimes people don't know, so they do because they don't know, huh? Or probably no childcare at home.
Okay. So similarly, related to children, is primary school safe to attend from November 1st?
Okay, I tell you what my personal view on this is. My personal view. Huh? My personal view is let's wait a little bit, get all the children vaccinated who are in primary school, then send them back to school. Meanwhile, let's fix ventilation, which we have not done. We have not even fixed ventilation for the secondary. We haven't fixed ventilation even for parliament, okay, as far as I know. So right now, if you want to send primary students back, my suggestion is the ventilation is fixed, number one. We have good classroom bubbles. The teachers are all vaccinated. Everybody is tested once a week. That's the minimum to send them back without vaccination. If those are not in place, then keep some option for back to online schooling, even though it's not. I want children to go back to school. I'm frightened what's happening to our children, but I'm also worried about seeing a 5-month-old child die from COVID, or a 7-year-old getting up in ICU on a ventilator. Those are not pleasant realities as well.
Okay. I know with the opening of the economy sector and with the interstate travel, people are also, government also want to help the tourism sector. So is hotel a safe place to stay?
No, not unless the hotel is fixed. Yes, I've seen online colleagues of mine from other countries who actually go and test. They bring these small devices which actually can produce sort of like safe smoke. And they go and test the airflow. They look at the whole hotel room, and then their verdict is 0. This is unsafe hotel room, because it's air being shared with other rooms, air coming in from the corridor. You want that hotel room to be a unit that does not share air with anything else. That's the way. And so central aircon has to be turned off. You need split unit aircons. You need to know what to do with the lifts. A lot of this kind of mechanics has to be thought through. No, not right now. I don't see people doing it. But of course, you can go for an outdoor chalet. That's another way to do tourism, isn't it? You go to a place which is in nature. Each person got their own chalet. The air space is much more protected. So there are ways to do tourism a lot safer. I'm also for opening the economy and salvaging our jobs. I'm very much for doing that, yes.
Okay. There's a question regarding the use of portable UVC lights. It seems that there was a dentist who had a portable UVC unit on at night. The plants in the clinic died. Any comments?
Yeah, I think that, UVC has got some toxicity. It's very low toxicity, but I don't want to shine the UVC on my eyes or my skin. Definitely, I'm going to damage it, okay? So those kind of UVCs, as I said, are used by doctors and dentists and other individuals in their office at night after they've gone. Actually, only 15, 20 minutes is all required. So actually, I wouldn't left it on night. Maybe if you want to be safe, half an hour. So maybe the last person who's leaving, you have a staff member designated, we turn on the lights, we leave the premises, we come back half an hour later and we switch off everything. That's one way to do it. So we don't leave it on the whole night. Okay. But I have seen some people with portable UV, portable UV, which they shine on the newspaper. They shine on things. Don't do that. That I think you're fooling yourself, because you need about 15 minutes minimum to kill the bugs, the virus. Otherwise, it's not working. Yeah.
Okay. But what about home fellowship? Is there a maximum number you would set for a home gathering?
I do not know that number. It depends on the airflow. You can use both these criteria, the US and the international criteria of exchanging the air 5 to 6 times per hour, as well as the DOSH, our local health authority DOSH guidelines, which is 10 liters per minute per person. And that should give you an idea. If you cannot achieve 10 liters per minute per person, then that limits the number of people who can be inside there. Right now, if you give me a ballpark figure, an average living room of someone, I think you're looking at 5 to 7 individuals, provided you fix your ventilation. I don't think you can have 15 people in an average living room. It's very cramped. A lot of people breathing there together.
So even that, you are not advising the home fellowship to use aircon? It's preferred to have window and fan?
It depends. You see, the home unit aircon is very different from the central aircon in a church. Okay, if that aircon is sucking air in and not recirculating, many aircons work by recirculating air, which means they suck the air from the room in, 70% of it, and that's the means to become energy efficient, can cool the air in the room better. But if your aircon is just sucking air in and you've got a mechanism to suck air out, well, then I think you can keep the aircon on. It depends on how you're using this air conditioning.
Okay. How about pastoral visitation?
A lot of people do want their pastor to come. Some people are, very, very old. Some people do want, the comfort that they get. I believe that, can be done. The safest way to be is that the member you're visiting is vaccinated and you are vaccinated, first of all, okay? Secondly, you test yourself before you go. Even better, you can test the member also if you can afford that to do, okay? Then that makes the whole visit safe. The last thing is wear a mask. You can, I think. That makes the whole visit possible. But I wouldn't want to be a pastor that is doing maybe, 50 visits a month. That's a lot of people that I'm going to see in a very short time. Huh? So maybe limit the number that you're visiting, do the essential, and then work. Again, this is an evolution where we're going. Time will tell us. If you see a huge spike, like I showed you, starting to happen in Klang Valley, then Selangor, then you may need to cut back what you're doing. Yes.
Okay. And how often should RTK testing be done? Every week? Once in 2 weeks?
The ideal, if you are going to an office or school, the ideal is twice a week. That's from data. I didn't show that slide. I had that slide from the data that was done. If you do twice a week, then you increase your reliability of preventing COVID spread by past 90%. If you do once a week, then you drop it down to about 60%. But it's a matter of cost, isn't it? Overseas is extremely cheap and it's free in many countries. UK is doing twice a week. Many countries in Europe making it freely available to people to test when they want to test. And of course, when entering buildings. So if you're coming to church, it's once a week. I think once a week is okay because it's once a week you're coming. Workplace, you're coming every day. That's why the requirement to do twice a week. Okay.
Okay.
Somebody's got a nice comment there saying for the UV light, you can use a 3-pin plug to control the time to switch. Yes, you can use a timer. You can turn on the UV at your workplace with a timer. In fact, you don't have to be there when it comes on, and then it can turn off by itself. And that's a smart way to in a building.
All right.
Yeah.
There is a point of clarification.
Mm-hmm.
You say, is Dr. Amar saying that preacher and worship team can unmask while worship leading and preaching? I suppose this one has to do with provided they have done the testing. Am I right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
So if they've done the testing for that day, not yesterday, that for that day, and then yes, it's possible. But once they finish, please wear the mask. I think we still want to reduce your risk of getting infected. Don't forget, when you unmask, you open yourself to getting infected, huh? Not just to other people, because that you're sharing the airspace with other people at that time. So if I'm a pastor who's 85 years old, I would think twice about unmasked preaching, huh? Okay. But if I'm a 45-year-old pastor and I've had my dose of vaccine and I want to test and I'm negative, unmasked, yes, but please wear a mask soon after that, the moment you finished, yes.
Okay, thank you. I think we have answered all the questions related to church opening, except one more is more on the technical side. Any update on fully vaccinated and any update on fully vaccination and breakthrough infection leading to longer lasting immunity by some European studies?
Yes, I didn't show the data, but the reason people are boosting is that the antibodies, when you're testing antibodies rise up significantly. So, and from the real world data from Israel, you can see the hospitalization has crashed. The cases also have crashed. Singapore hasn't seen that yet because their boosting is just rolled out recently. So how long that will last, I don't think anybody knows it. Nobody can tell you how long this boost is going to last and whether it will last. Some people are now talking that maybe we are dealing with a 3-dose vaccine. That means this vaccine cannot work with 2 doses. It needs a 3rd dose. As you know that childhood vaccines, for example, when we give somebody hepatitis B as a child, there are 3 doses. 2 doses doesn't work effectively. So maybe this COVID vaccine requires 3 doses. I cannot answer that question effectively yet. Only time will tell and more data.
Okay. Well, this is let's make this the final question or a comment since our time is up. How come other countries like UK Premier League football fans so crowded in the stadium didn't wear masks for the whole match?
Yes, and if you go and read their doctors and their epidemiologists and their consultants, they're very upset. They're very annoyed with their government. The government is trying to get back, like ours, to normality, to open up, to get the economy kicking, to give the people a chance. But even right now in UK, people are wondering whether they have a Christmas. Can they actually celebrate Christmas? They may not be able to. Last year, they canceled Christmas. That means families couldn't meet. So right now, if you look at UK data, there's a huge outbreak happening among children. Thousands of children, hundreds of thousands of children cannot go to school because schools are shut here and there because of outbreak. Hospitals, as I told you, are getting full. And a lot of the staff also are infected. So obviously they're paying the price of opening all that big things. There is a spike after the stadium. If you go and look at the data very hard and go and read, after the stadium is opened, there's a huge spike. Yinming, I'm still prepared to take a couple more questions if we can. I know it's been long for people, but there may be important questions.
Okay. Do you recommend members to wear masks with face shield in the church service?
Yes, I am recommending that. I know it's a bit uncomfortable, but if you use it often enough, actually you get quite used to this. So yes, the minimum I would recommend is a face mask. I would say if you've a higher risk individual, again, that's a person who's past 60, if vaccinated or not, especially with some chronic illness, yeah, wear a face shield as an added thing. The best face shield is the one actually that actually doesn't let air come in here and protects the side and down to your chin. Mine, sometimes the ones I wear, I wear a hat because I prevent air from coming down from the top. So the whole idea of the face shield is two things. One, to prevent particles from reaching your eye and going into your cornea, which is known to infect you. Secondly, reduces particles reaching your mask and the air leak areas. So you sort of like have less of the aerosols actually hitting you. Okay. Right.
What about if the church vaccination rate is very high? Let's say 95% of the members are already vaccinated. Is it still necessary to put on a face shield and things like that? Isn't it a mask is enough since 95% of the members are vaccinated?
Okay, I hope that the person who asked the question saw the data I showed from Australia, where they still say some people are going to get long COVID, some people are going to die. So some of us who are fully vaccinated, even in good communities, are going to get a breakthrough. Where are we going to get a breakthrough? Not from the church. We'll get the breakthrough from our member from home or from work. And then we'll bring it to this congregation. And we are asymptomatic. Actually, we're more likely to be asymptomatic when we are getting a breakthrough because we're vaccinated. We get less symptoms. So we don't know we're infected. And then we spread that infection. Some older people are going to be, become unwell. And an occasional person is going to die. 1 in 1,000 is going to die. So again, it's a risk. I ask, how much do we accept? In the UK, people accept influenza deaths. They accept every year during winter, a lot of influenza deaths happen and people tolerate it. In our country, we don't have the same kind of tolerance. I'm not sure I would accept uncle, auntie, grandpa, grandma just dying like that, I'm not sure whether you will or not. So I would still like to maintain some degree of protectivity. Again, these are guidance for the present moment. We are working our way through and we will see more. Just don't make hasty decisions. Open gradually, open progressively, open in a measured way, so they don't end up like Israel. We open suddenly and then got a spike. Open like Singapore, open a lot more and suddenly have a spike. So we open gradually and we watch the data that will tell us what's happening and how much more we can open.
What is the best time to do RTK tests? Before Sunday service or is it the day before?
No, not the day before. I would do that morning. And again, the ideal is to have one at home. Everybody test, come to place of worship. Right? Again, this element of trust there and a matter of who finances, especially for the people who can't afford it.
Okay.
How about double masking? Somebody's asking. I'm going to.
Yeah, is double masking really help? Is double masking really help?
Double masking and twist and tie of the surgical mask, those two things, and tuck, reduce the air leak at the side to some degree, but it does not do it well enough. Okay, when do I use double masking? I'm out bird watching in the jungle. I'm a bird watcher. I like to watch birds. And so another bird watcher turns up. I put on my 3-ply mask and my double mask, and I accept that I'm outdoors. Remember, I'm outdoors, in clean air, and still I double mask with this fella. And all my other bird watchers also are double mask, actually. We all do that. But I'm going into a building, or I'm not going to use a surgical mask or double mask. I'm going to use a KN95 or a N95 mask, okay? Like yesterday, we had visitors to our home to fix some lights. Our lights were busted. So my wife and I wore N95 masks to tolerate this electrician coming. They were here for about an hour. And we ran the fan to blow air outward. So there was a draft creating air outward. So we took some measures. And then even then, we didn't invade their airspace for half an hour to 45 minutes to let that air clear. So you got to evaluate each space, each thing that you're doing. Think it through.
Okay. Is air traveling by air safe? And how about protection when doing air travel internationally? Is it risky?
God, I would love to travel as well. Okay. The airlines have taken a lot of effort. Their air exchange is much better than anywhere else. So you can expect that their ventilation is good. Okay. They're using good filters and they've done that. The problem is that you are in a confined space with other individuals for a fixed period of time. The longer your flight, the worse it is. Then you got to use the very cramped toilet, which all of us have to go and use, right? Which is another aerosol risk. Fully vaccinated person, maybe with a booster dose, wearing a very good mask, I think your risk is small, but there is still some risk. I think if you don't need to travel, don't. If you're going for a holiday, avoid that right now, I think. If you're going because you have to go take your child overseas for, education purposes, then go. But wear the best mask. Invest in a really good mask. And remember that N95 is not easy to wear for very long, and the earlobes bite into you as well. Your earlobes, eat into you. So you got to think about all those things for long-term travel. And some people might even wear a face shield or goggles. Maybe might look less, difficult in a plane. So think that through. Think about all the surfaces, and perhaps don't eat. Maybe a long flight, don't eat, and use a toilet before. Some people might wear Pampers on that flight, so they don't have to use a toilet at all. Not very pleasant to wear Pampers, but some people prepare to do that.
Okay. There is a question that say people with COVID, yet the test show negative. What's your opinion? It seems a person infected with COVID for 3 to 4 days. COVID test done can show negative result. Is it possible?
Yes, it's possible. No test is foolproof. Why? One, you must test at the right time. You may miss it, there's a rise in the virus and then it drops. Secondly, is the type of test you use. Some are more sensitive than others. Definitely the PCR is more sensitive than the RTK antigen. Thirdly, it's how you collect the sample. If you collect the sample wrongly, don't collect the sample well, then the test is just not going to show the result. I don't know how many of you saw this recent problem in the UK where 40,000 plus people were told they were negative. But actually, they were positive by one lab because the lab mucked up. So these are tests. They're all human-based and have their limitations. So it is possible. I think in this time when COVID is still spreading in Malaysia, I would say if you have any of the symptoms of COVID, you should consider yourself positive. If the test tells you you're negative, you still isolate yourself and protect other people.
Okay. How often do we change our mask? If we wear for 30 minutes, can we reuse it after airing it in the sun?
No, I don't think airing in the sun is any use. I would trash it. So if you're talking about surgical mask, don't reuse a surgical mask. After you've used a surgical mask, you trash it. And by the way, break the strings. Surgical masks. A lot of our surgical masks end up in the water supply, in from all the places dump the garbage, then leaks into the water supply. A lot of animals are getting damaged now, so break the strings. So no, you can't reuse a surgical mask, trash it. You can reuse some, very few N95 and the KN94 masks from Korea, especially the Air Queen Nano mask, that particular brand. But the way to reuse it is to spray with alcohol, 75%, and then air dry that one. So that's a very different mechanism. That one can be reused. Even though they say can reuse 7 to 10 times, my wife and I only use 5 times. We also don't take the risk of reusing too many times.
What about those washable copper masks? Is it
I don't have enough experience. I've seen the data, but I don't have enough experience to answer that one about the copper.
Is it all right to go for a walk, jog outdoor without wearing mask?
Yes, it is. But I've listened to lots of people and look at the data. Before Delta, it was very safe. With Delta, if somebody is jogging in front of you and you're jogging behind him or her and you're following along all the way for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I think you can get infected. So try and jog or walk with your own airspace. My wife and I are blessed to live in a home which did end road. So this morning I was out at 6 o'clock, just before 6, doing my 30-minute vigorous exercise, which we've been doing for the last 2 years. And nobody shares the airspace with us, only my wife and me. So that's very, very safe. Some of my neighbors, they walk around, then they stop to meet another neighbor, chit-chat, saw the paperman, chit-chat. Another person, oh, that is very, very high risk if you go and stopping around and chit-chatting with people as you are walking around. So if you're walking around, try and choose a space. I know some people have chosen to walk at different times. I see some of my neighbors, they walk at noon with an umbrella because they want that airspace to themselves. Other people go and find a space when there's nobody. I always think the cemeteries are wonderful places to walk. I like cemeteries, actually. They're a place that nobody goes. People are takut. So that's another good airspace to walk. So find a place that's clear. If there's a group, I think avoid them. And if you're following somebody's airstream, try and break that following airstream. But yeah, I don't think you need to wear a mask in those situations. Yes.
Okay, this question more about food. When we dabao food, people steam or oven heat up dabao food before consuming. How long or more than 100 degrees is safe enough?
My wife and I don't reheat tapao food. We buy hot food. Okay, so I think if you buy hot food, which just been cooked, like today we had this phenomenal egg noodles. This particular man who's and his wife were very, very good for many years. It's hot, really hot soup, and he cooked his noodles. I bring my own containers. I don't use theirs. They are fussy also. I watch what they do. They're also masked and they're fussy what they do. And I buy from the outside. I didn't even walk to the shop, you know. So I don't do that. But we change containers. When I come back, we will decant to other containers, you know, and we wash and clean our hands at that time. But if you're buying food that has been pre-cooked, then you may need to consider this. Again, the risk is small. Okay. I would think the bigger risk is this. I was thinking this morning, watching people eat indoors. They use the bowls, their saliva, their spoons, their chopsticks, and then some people take the bowls, go and wash a bit, and then come back and reuse again. That one worries me a little bit about in-dining, isn't it? As in a coffee shop setting. I hope that people have sufficient cutlery for one whole set, and then after that, they properly soak it in soap and water to kill the virus before reusing. So that one, I think, is slightly higher risk to me than buying back.
I know some coffee shop, they provide you with a bowl of hot water for you to rinse the cutlery before you consume. Does that help, hot water?
I guess so, you know, but bring your own cutlery. That's another way to go around it, isn't it? Huh?
Okay.
You can even bring your own bowl and say, hey, put in this one, please, for me. Huh? There are ways to make your in-dining or coffee shop makan a bit safer, you know. Think about it. Yeah.
All right. Is swimming in public pool safe?
Chlorine in the public pool kills the coronavirus. I did write one SOP with the National Swimming Association to how to make swimming safe. The only dangerous part is when you come and you go, and when you are actually in the sort of locker room, and it's not that, but actually in the pool, it is very safe. Okay, so think about the space outside the pool where people might stop to chit chat. You're definitely not going to mask at the swimming pool because you're diving into the water. So it's outside the pool, meeting, coming, locker room, and all that. So perhaps don't shower there. If you want, go home and shower, so you cut down the number of time. But actual swimming is safe.
What about spa then?
Spa is very different from swimming. There's no chlorine there at all. Chlorine is the one killing the virus. I would think that the humidified air, it may be spreading. I do not know about that temperature in the spa, whether it's good enough to kill the coronavirus or not. So I'd be a bit cautious right now. You're spending time in a very small, confined location. Similarly, like a gym, I think gym should now work very hard on ventilation, because gym is where you're exerting a lot. A lot of ventilation is happening. You're breathing out a lot of particles. So maybe the gym should also think very hard about their ventilation and maybe do some outdoor gym activities as well.
Okay, just now you mentioned about water baptism. It's good that don't share water, but since it's a swimming pool they use chlorine, is it? Are we able to add chlorine into our baptismal pool?
Never thought about that, Yin Ming. Huh? You know, need to think about that. It's possible, I guess, but chlorinated water is not so nice, isn't it? Huh? As a whole, yeah.
Yeah, and of course we also do not know whether there's any proportion to the volume of water, how
yes,
much chlorine,
you can.
You know.
And if you Bak Ming, you remind me, I will send you the SOP, which gives how much chlorine levels you need to add also. Parts per million kind of thing, yeah.
Okay, good. And finally, what is the risk factor how about if people spit inside the pool?
Yeah, I think that's, of course, if somebody spit and you're just next to them and you swallow the spit, that's a higher risk. But generally, that will be, the chlorine will take care of that. And you must recognize that swimming pools also have got this water turnover. If you look very carefully, the water's coming and going, so they're trying to take care of that as well. Huh? Of course, some people have a nasty habit of peeing in the swimming pool without you knowing. Huh? Yeah, that also happens, and that's a bit messy. You know, generally the chlorine does kill. Huh? Okay. Yeah.
What is a risk factor if we are masked but others are not masked?
We don't go near them.
Okay.
So if somebody comes to do a delivery in our house, let's say we buy something online, the first thing my wife should say, put up your mask, because some guys, you know, their nose is exposed.
Yeah, yeah.
First thing my wife will tell, because everybody gets a gift from us. Everybody will be coming to our house, gets an ang pao gift. And so we want to bless them, but you please make sure that you are also protecting us. So don't mix with anybody who unmasked. I think this must become something that we don't want the national Security Council to take care of, the police to take care of, but we want the public to take care of. We want to tell everybody, mask. Unless you got a reason you cannot mask, in which case you can show us something, medical reason that you cannot mask. Otherwise, wear a mask all the time and wear it properly.
How safe is it to go to hospital for appointment?
Yeah, this is a risk, of course. Hospitals, I don't know whether they fix their ventilation. I'm not sure. I know some hospitals are trying to work on it, but hospitals are resource poor places. Money doesn't come very much to our government, our Ministry of Health hospitals. So, you got to look at that. If you're going to, let's say, a private hospital or GP, a GP is the best, of course. I would arrange with them. I wait in the car. I pop in for my appointment, quickly finish and go off. That's the safest way to do it. But when you're coming for a clinic appointment in the government or private hospitals, it's a very large number of people in the clinic. I think that one has to be taught. Go if necessary. If you are ill, you have to go, please go. I think must go, okay? The doctors and nurses are all vaccinated. They all mask and they try and wear the best quality mask that they can, okay? So that much is safe. It's a ventilation, the air that's not so safe. If I was still running a pediatric clinic, which I'm not, in the Ministry of Health, I would make sure everything is by strict appointment. Even previously was by appointment. I tell you not to come early. I say you will arrive within 15 minutes, you'll be seen. So now I will make that even shorter. You wait outside, we got your handphone, we send you SMS. Okay, bring you and your child right now. See the doctor, off you go to the pharmacy, pick up drugs. Okay, even that the pharmacy can be picked by, by drive pass. So I think we can do this sort of things. Whether it's being done, I do not know. I think we as a public should encourage our doctors, both in Ministry of Health and private, to do this sort of thing for us. Because even long term, this is a good thing, isn't it? Who wants to wait 2 hours to see a doctor? You want to receive a message, say, come now. The appointment is in 10 minutes. Okay, that sort of thing is the best. But when we're waiting in our car, the main fear I have is that we're running our engines and polluting the world, and the world is dying from climate change. So we need to wait in a way that we don't run our car outside. Yeah.
What about dental appointment?
Dental appointment, you unmask, you're opening your mouth. Have to be done, isn't it? How long are you going to struggle with that severe toothache? Huh? My wife went some time back, even though in the midst of the pandemic, we had to go. Huh? Again, make sure your dentists are vaccinated. That's a good thing. Again, try and make an appointment with them so that you're not in the waiting area waiting. The waiting area is another risk area for you. I think that's guidelines I can say. Mask until the last minute, unmask, put your mask back on.
Indoor exercise.
And by the way, when you come back from these places which are higher risk, shower, change your clothes and shower. Huh? Okay, yes, sorry.
Indoor exercise, is it needed to wear mask?
Very,
I go for the gym.
Yeah, I think the gym is a slightly higher risk place than even an indoor dining, because people are exercising and many gyms are air conditioned. So they need to change that. I'm keen that people get back to the gym. Many people are put on weight. They need their physical activity. As I said, try and transition the gym to partly outdoor and indoor, try and open up as much as possible to air exchange. But we're not speaking about ventilation in our country as much as I spoke just now to you. Please share what I wrote about ventilation to anybody you can. We need to fix it. Very hard to do a gym mask. Because I've been to the gym before, you exert quite a lot, Even when I'm doing my outdoor 30 minutes, I don't want to wear a mask. It's not easy to do that. So no, but you got to assess your risk. Similarly, somebody asked about facial at beauty salon. Work with your beauty salon if you can. Many of us, people who know their regular beauty salon, can say, hey, can you do by appointment basis so that only one person is there at a time? Other people are waiting for their appointment. Maybe there's a short staggered period where there's an overlap, so they don't have to wait for too long. Again, it's aircon. I doubt ventilation is fixed. Facial means you're off with your mask. Huh? If you're doing your nails, then I think please mask.
Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions that we have, even from the floor. We really appreciate you, Dr. Amar. I think the sharing has been excellent, that we learned so much, and it does open up our understanding, especially sometimes we thought some of the things that we do are quite foolproof, but look like nothing is really foolproof, and we still have to take a lot of precaution. And I believe that your sharing is also very helpful for a church opening, things that we need to look into, the air filtration as well as the ventilation aspect. We really appreciate your time in
Thank
spite
you,
of
Nick.
your back-to-back schedule. You make time for us. We really thank you. Why, those of us in the Zoom room, why don't we just give Dr. Amar a hand of applause,
Thank
you
you,
know?
thank you.
Yeah, either
And
physically
say,
or reaction.
thanks,
Yes.
Amy. I say we mustn't become anxious. I think our rest and trust must be in God. And that's where we must rest our anxiety and our fears. But at the same time, we must be smart, must be wiser, and do things in the correct way. And thank you very much. I enjoy your church group and organization, and always well done. Happy to come back again and do something here. I hope not to, as my wife says, I want to stop talking about COVID and do other things. Yes.
Yes, we're going to continue to pray and trust the Lord and do our part as responsible citizens. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And what have been shared will be recorded. We'll make it available for the public, and do share it with your friends, your family members, and everyone you think will benefit from it. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you, Dr. Amar, once
Bye-bye.
again.